Hi, I'm Rick, and you're watching Life in Color. This is the Squaredrop Camper build part 4. If you have not been following along, you're welcome to go back to the old videos. We have installed the skins, printed the skins before we installed them, which is kind of neat. And we have installed the doors and windows, and I will take you through that. We went back and forth with Randy, our graphic designer, quite a few times to sort of dial in something that we all agreed to. The waves on the side of it are kind of traditional, but the checker on the top panel is more designed to sort of go in with the checker plate that we're putting on the front of the trailer. So that was kind of a unique touch. Really traditional, but kind of unique at the same time. Just to give you a perspective, from the top of the white to the bottom of the white on the board is 5 feet, and the board's 10 feet long. So this thing's actually moving quite rapidly, and Richard is 6'4", so gives you an idea of how big the board really is. Before we could install the skin, we had to get the wiring ready. And that meant that we had to drill holes in the frame, we had to pull wire and install switches, and actually I also installed a dimmer, which is a really nice option. One of the reasons why we built a 10-foot long trailer was to have an electrical panel / battery box and closets in the trailer itself on the inside. You can see in this clip I'm drilling holes through the 1x1s, and then I'm using a Dremel bit to deburr the steel to make sure that it's safe for the wire to pass to travel through it. I pulled 2 wires, 1 wire for the fan on the roof and 1 wire to go to the light switch. From the light switch, I have a wire going to the 4 lights on the inside and a wire going to the outside on the driver's side and the outside on the passenger side for external lights. On the roof of the trailer, I plan to use 2 solar panels, or 200 watts each, and the wires to connect to the solar controller are quite substantial. I think they're 6/0, so I decided to run those separately and run down through the roof into conduit. Now it was time to jack up the trailer, get the wheel out of the way, get the trailer down on jack stands, and get it ready to install the wall. I use isopropyl alcohol to wipe down all the points of adhesion for the VHB tape. You don't want that stuff coming off. It's insanely expensive, so you get 1 crack at installing it and 1 crack at making that wall fit. We had to decide on a height for the trailer, and I chose 4 feet 6 inches. And I think it's a good height. It's a little bit expensive because you're using a lot more material, a lot more plywood, and a lot more aluminum. But the aluminum that I bought was 5 feet wide and 10 feet long, so the length was fine, but I was going to have to trim it down to get it to fit the height of the trailer. So we started by trimming down the bottom, and then once the trailer, the wall was fitted to the side of the trailer, we were able to make adjustments using actually a small router and a bit that's designed for trimming countertops. When I printed the sides of the trailer, I was a little bit concerned that there potentially could be some damage that would happen when I was installing the graphics, because the ink on the aluminum is not protected. And sure enough, the ground up bits of aluminum scratch the trailer a fair bit. So you have to be incredibly careful when you're cutting it. Next time, I would over laminate it with a cold laminate. My stupidity. So the challenges I had were to use the tools from the inside or have them free floating away from the wall of the trailer so that I would not damage it. A couple of years ago, I was installing a floor in a buddy's house, and I got to work with a guy who'd had years and years of experience in the HVAC industry, and he taught me how to use a reciprocating saw to level joists and use it literally as a sanding tool for trimming. It was amazing, and ever since I've never looked back. It's one of my favorite tools to use. The Vintage Technologies website gives you the dimensions of the door, and it's accurate. What it doesn't tell you is that the door frame itself is larger than 30 by 36. If you sneak a peek and look in the background, you're going to see a whole lot of an extruded aluminum product called 8020. And you're going to see alu panel and wood and about all sorts of nifty little things that we haven't even started talking about yet. Super exciting. We've worked on it really hard. It's taken a lot longer than I thought it would. I just kept on nipping here, tucking there, keeping it as tight as humanly possible, really checking and rechecking until I had... If I had have laminated this, then I wouldn't have damaged that. But unfortunately, I didn't laminate it, and I don't even know why. The doors are massive, and I don't know why, but they don't put screw holes in the corners of the doors. So I went ahead and used a step drill bit and buzzed out the corners. So just I split the difference, used my eyes, didn't do anything dramatic, and put holes in the corners so that I could sink screws in there to keep it nice and tight. They're big doors. Then it was time to add the butyl tape. I did buy the kit from Vintage Doors, and one thing I wasn't impressed with was the size of the screws. They were quite anemic in my opinion, but they did work, and I did replace some of them with larger screws. The tape is pretty straightforward. You peel back the cover, you apply it lightly. Don't pack it down, because that's what's going to happen when you add the screws to it and when you cinch it into the door. I very carefully picked up the door as to not touch the tape with my hands, and carried it over to the opening and carefully placed it into the opening as to not jar or damage the butyl tape, because that's what keeps it sealed. Then it was time to mount the door to the trailer. So you use the screws provided, and again, some of them were a little bit small and didn't bite as well as they needed to. Most of them worked just fine, and I replaced the ones that didn't with larger screws. So basically you drive it in and you watch the butyl tape squish out the side, and you know you've done your job. I was incredibly careful to make sure that I didn't cut outside of the ring on the inside, or the trim, and it worked out for the most part really good. There was a little bit of damage in the top right corner on this one, and I'll show that to you in the final video. You can see my screwing skills are fabulous, but that's just the way it goes when you've been at it for 6 or 8 hours, and things don't always line up exactly the way you want them to. After a couple minutes of Jen holding the ring for me and me driving it in, we were able to get it to settle in nicely, and I'm actually thrilled with how it turned out. So couldn't have been better as far as I'm concerned. The doors came with a plastic trim that you insert in to 2 tracks to cover the screws, and it's a very tedious, fiddly project to deal with, but it, in the end it gets done. I found that I used a pick with I think a 90-degree angle on it to actually make it easier after I broke a fingernail. I know that sounds wussy, but it happened. And then you can see with the pick it goes a lot smoother. You've got to get by the screws, and some of the screws I used were oversized, so that's a little tricky, but it's definitely possible. When you're installing the trim and you get to the part that you've started at, or the area you started at, you want to cut past it and apply the trim over top of the edge. That does a couple of things. One, you want to do it to windward so that it doesn't want to blow itself open, and 2, you want to make sure that you've got an overlap to not let water get in there and rust those screws. The specs that Vintage gave us for the window openings was exact, and literally all I had to do was cut out the excess material, place the windows into the slots, and with the screws provided, screw them in. And it literally, I apologize, but it happened so fast that it was over and done with in a minute. I'll actually walk you through it on the final thing, showing you how I did it, and I'm sure you'll like it. So literally all I did was place the window into the opening that I created and got someone to hold it. I made sure that this mark right here was at the very bottom of the window. That's the rain drain. So you want to make sure that, or gutter, whatever you want to call it, if you are installing windows or doors, that's always on the bottom. With the doors, you know that they're going to open up to the back So that's no problem, but you'll notice down there that there are the 2 drains right there. I used a product called Sikaflex, and no, I'm not sponsored by them. I've used it for years. It's a great product, and I've had no issues with it whatsoever. It's sticky, and I know 3M makes a product similar to it, but I just stick with what I know. Get someone to hold the window in place, and then you come inside. You place the trim into the opening. Someone's holding the window on the back side, or you can clamp it if you've got the time, or you don't. Have an extra set of hands, and then all you literally do is screw it in and just work your way around. Go across and install your window. I've got one screw here that didn't bite, and I'm going to replace it with a larger screw. But other than that, with the Sikaflex on the outside and the amount of screws that I have in, I'm 110% confident this window is sealed and is going to work great. These windows are very simple. They've got screen. They're tinted dark so that people can't see in as easily, and they have two openings. And that's really all there is to it. To complete the side of the trailer, I needed to attach the exterior light. I added VHB to the outside, and then I added a butt connector and a heat shrink to the light itself, attached them to the 2 wires that came out of the hole that I drilled in the side of the trailer, shrunk down the heat shrink, and then peeled the VHB and stuck it to the side of the trailer. Once that was done, I was able to use screws and screw in and then put the caps on. So it's quite a nice little light. It's pretty bright. We've got a lot of projects left to finish up this trailer, including an inspection. So next week's video should be pretty full as well, including the water system. We're going to get into the galley and building it out in 80/20, and we'll get deeper into the electrical system. So I think it'll be worth watching. Anyway, thanks again. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to leave us a like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you next week.